The evolutionists realized that they can no longer rely on the fossil record to give them any support. So what they've done is they've come up with a very crafty alternative to the Darwinian concept of evolution. They call it the punctuated equilibria concept.
One of the really exciting developments in evolutionary theory in the last 10 to 15 years has been the theory that instead of evolving very gradually over a long period of time, that evolution came in short bursts that were interspersed with much longer periods where virtually nothing happened.
You see, this solves all kinds of problems intellectually for the evolutionist. He doesn't have to look at the fossil record.
There is no evidence in the fossil record that one type of animal ever changed into another type of animal. Punctuated equilibria comes along and says that isolated populations of animals evolved rapidly and left no fossil trace. But this is an argument from lack of data. There are no transitional forms, and that's used then as proof of the brand of evolution called punctuated equilibria. This is bad science.
With this new information, we're trying to refine our view of evolution. And what's emerging is a much more powerful synthesis of the evolutionary theories.
I'm convinced that the idea of punctuated equilibria is really a desperate attempt to salvage evolutionary theory.
Punctuated equilibrium, while attempting to explain the lack of intermediate forms between neighboring species, neglects to address the real issue that asks why there are no transitions between major categories of life forms. One extraordinary answer was offered by Goldschmidt's hopeful monster theory.
Who would believe, for instance, that a reptile laid an egg and a bird came crawling out of the egg, as Goldschmidt had said about this theory when he first came up with it?
We are literally going back to the very foundations of evolutionary principles and reevaluating once again the mechanisms whereby evolution takes place. Unfortunately, I think a number of those outside the scientific fields that deal with evolution interpret this as a casting doubt on the very, what I would call the fact of evolution.
What it does say to us is that the evolutionists are running scared.
It seems like almost every new development in science is converging to destroy evolution. Whether we're talking about new discoveries in astronomy or in paleontology or biology, this is true.
I suddenly realized that there was very little evidence for the theory of evolution, and yet I had just accepted it as truth from a very young age.
I just realized finally, after studying all this material and thinking this thing through, that the evidence, the scientific evidence for creation, is a lot stronger than the scientific evidence for evolution.
In the last decade, most of the basic pillars upon which evolution has stood have collapsed, and the theory is in chaos. Now, unfortunately, at this time, the evolutionists are crying louder than ever before that evolution is a fact.
Well, it's my personal view that evolution is a dead certain fact.
Evolution, there is no question that it happened.
The geological record cannot be explained in any other way than through the evolutionary process.
Many times you'll hear the statement that evolution is a fact, but a scientist should know better than to make a statement like that. If evolution has ever occurred, it was not observed, and therefore it's outside the realm of science. It's inaccessible to scientists and the scientific method. Many of my evolutionary colleagues are coming up with rather bizarre theories. It seems that they recognize that evolution doesn't make good sense scientifically, and so they're forced to come up with these incredible imaginary ideas. For instance, some now recognize that the spontaneous generation of life from non-life is scientifically impossible. So what do? Do they attribute it to a creator? No, they claim that life came from outer space. Well, they can believe that if they want to, but they shouldn't call it science, and they shouldn't teach it in schools as if it were science.
Evolution is simply a matter of making up stories in place of the actual scientific data.
Science used to be the search for truth. Now it seems it's deteriorated into the search for a believable story.
The scientist who can make up the most plausible sounding story and can get it printed or get the media to tell about it, he is the one that becomes famous. I can say that as a scientist I see zero evidence that evolution has occurred or that any is going on today.
One scientist I spoke with said that even if evolution is not true, there's no way it could ever be retracted because it had gone too far. Millions of textbooks would have to be reprinted, and museums all over the world would have to tear down their exhibits. Society would never trust science again.